Somewhere in America, an undisclosed location. The year? 2023. Two federal agents were wrapping up what had been an ordinary evening operation. The kind of night where nothing unusual happens, where paperwork is the most exciting thing on the agenda. And then, they looked up. Hovering silently in the sky was a sphere. Round, glowing, burning orange, like an ember suspended in darkness. It made no sound. It obeyed no wind. And then, just as suddenly as it appeared, it was gone. The next day, a second team. Different location, same orange orb. The day after, a third team. In 48 hours, 6 trained federal law enforcement officers, sworn agents of the United States government, had witnessed the same inexplicable object. But that wasn't even the most shocking part. What they saw next defied everything they thought they knew about the sky above them. The officers described it in their sworn testimony to the US government. The large orange orb, it wasn't just hovering, it was launching. From its core, small red orbs emerged. Tight, deliberate, organized, like a mothership deploying its fleet. The red spheres moved in patterns, forward, upward, downward, as if navigating with purpose. This happened not once, not twice, but 5 times across the 2-day period. Now, if this had been reported by a drunk man at a roadside diner, we'd call it a tall tale. But this came in the form of sworn federal testimony.
To understand that, we need to go back, way back, to where this story truly begins. On May 8th, 2026, something unprecedented happened. The United States Department of Defense opened its vaults. 162 previously classified UFO files, some dating back decades, were released to the public through a new government portal. FBI documents, Pentagon reports, NASA transcripts, State Department cables. Inside those files, 28 never-before-seen videos, 14 never-before-seen photographs, and 400 unexplained cases. Cases the United States government itself cannot explain. Let that sink in. The most powerful intelligence apparatus in human history, the country that put men on the moon, that built the internet, that developed nuclear weapons, says, we don't know what these things are. Among the released cases, in 2023, over the Mediterranean near Greece, a U.S. military sensor system captured an object moving at 80 miles per hour and making a perfect 90-degree turn. Not a gradual arc, not a banking maneuver, a right angle, at speed. Basic physics says this is impossible. The G-force required would destroy any known aircraft and any living crew inside it. The infrared video runs for 2 minutes and 57 seconds. The object performs this maneuver multiple times. In 2024, in Iraq, a U.S. surveillance aircraft was conducting a strike operation when an object blazed across the sensor feed at extraordinary speed and vanished. In Syria, 2 semi-transparent orange zones flickered for 2 seconds, then nothing. In Japan, in the Indo-Pacific, an object was tracked with a body shaped like a football, with 3 protruding extensions, 1 pointing upward, 2 downward. None of these had earthly explanations on file. Now I want you to look at something. 1947, New Mexico, USA. 1948, Germany. 1952, near the Soviet border. 1960. They are all places where the United States military was, or currently is, most active, most technologically deployed, most secretive about what it was doing in the sky. People always ask, why do aliens always visit New York in the movies? I want to ask a different question. Why do UFOs always appear near US military bases? There are 2 possible explanations, and neither involves little green men. Or perhaps there's a third. We'll get to that. But first, let's go to the moment when all of this madness began. The single event that changed how humanity looks at the sky forever. It happened on a clear summer day in 1947 over the mountains of Washington State. June 24th, 1947. Private pilot Kenneth Arnold is flying his small plane over the Cascade Mountains in Washington State when he spots something extraordinary. 9 gleaming, crescent-shaped objects flying in a V formation at roughly 1,200 miles per hour. That's twice the speed of any aircraft that existed in 1947. When reporters ask him to describe them, Arnold doesn't say saucer-shaped. He says they moved like a saucer would if you skipped it across water, describing the motion. But the headlines twisted his words. Flying saucers spotted over Washington. 2 words, and the entire world changed. Then, 2 weeks later, in a dusty New Mexico field, farmer W. Mac Brazel stumbles upon wreckage,
tinfoil, rubber strips, unknown materials. He doesn't think much of it until Arnold's flying saucer story spreads across the nation. He takes the debris to the local sheriff. The sheriff calls Roswell Army Airfield, and on July 8, 1947, the U.S. Army issued.
Over the next 6 months of 1947, over 300 UFO sightings were reported. By 1952, so many unexplained objects were being seen over Washington, D.C., that they were registering on military radar. Headlines screamed, "Saucers swarm over Capitol." The United States government was forced to act. In 1952, the United States government launched Project Blue Book, an official Air Force program tasked with investigating every reported UFO sighting in the country. It ran for 17 years, until 1969. In that time, they cataloged and investigated over 12,000 cases. Most had simple explanations: weather balloons, conventional aircraft, planets and stars misidentified by untrained civilian eyes, satellites, light reflections. The human brain, scientists noted, is extraordinarily good at seeing patterns, even in chaos. It's called pareidolia, and it makes us see faces in clouds and alien ships in weather equipment. But then there were the 701 cases. 701 unexplained sightings with no earthly explanation. And 3 years later, in 1997, the Air Force published another report addressing the claims about alien bodies recovered at Roswell. The answer? Crash test dummies, mannequins used in Air Force parachute experiments at high altitude. Civilians who spotted them, sometimes weeks after the tests, misremembered the timeline and reported alien bodies. The greatest alien conspiracy of the 20th century had a very human explanation. But not all of the unexplained cases happened within our atmosphere. Some of them happened in space. December 1965, NASA's Gemini 7 mission. Astronauts Frank Borman and Jim Lovell are orbiting Earth when Borman radios Houston ground control and says a word that had never been spoken in space before. Bogey at 10 o'clock high. In military terminology, a bogey is an unidentified aircraft. It's a combat term, the kind of word you use when you don't know if what's in your sky is friendly or hostile. Ground control asks if it might be a piece of their own rocket booster. Borman says no, he can see the booster separately. Then he says, "We have several, looks like 3, actual sightings." 3 unknown objects in orbit, tracked by 2 trained NASA astronauts. Subsequent analysis confirmed that the objects were distinct, not the spacecraft's own debris, not the booster. They were something else. The first UFO sighted in space. But the most stunning revelations come from the moon. In the newly released Apollo files, a photograph from the 1972. The second human being to walk on the moon, a man who does not speak lightly. In 1969, while orbiting the moon in the Apollo 11 command module, Aldrin reported seeing flashing lights inside the cabin while trying to sleep, and then a large, sparkling light source on the lunar surface below. He thought it could be laser light, but laser technology capable of reaching the moon didn't exist in 1969. During the Apollo 12 mission, unusual light flashes and particles were observed from the landing site. Difficult to explain, never fully explained. Whatever was on the moon in 1969, we still don't know. September 2013. An undisclosed location in the United States. Witnesses report seeing a metallic object in the sky, surrounded by a bright, sustained glow. Measuring between 130 and 195 feet in length, that's roughly the size of a Boeing 747 and a half. The shape? Ellipsoidal. An elongated oval, like a pointed egg. It hovered, then disappeared. The witnesses contacted the FBI. The Bureau investigated. And based on eyewitness testimony and a site photograph, FBI investigators produced an official sketch of the object. The image is striking. Not the wild, cartoonish flying saucer of 1950 science fiction, but something geometric, precise, almost architectural in its proportions. The FBI stated clearly, this sketch is based on an actual photograph of the object. Now, a drawing by itself proves nothing, but the weight of this case isn't in the sketch, it's in the institutional response. The FBI, not some UFO hobbyist blog, not a conspiracy YouTube channel, officially investigated this incident. Now let's talk about the pattern I mentioned at the very beginning of this video. Because when you stop letting the emotion of the alien narrative cloud your judgment and start looking at the data, a different picture emerges. Here is explanation number 1. UFOs are, in large part, America's own classified technology,
and always have been. The Cold War was a technological arms race, fought as much in the sky as anywhere else. The US and Soviet Union were both developing spy aircraft, high-altitude surveillance balloons, and experimental flight technology that neither side wanted the other to know about. When one of these projects flew over civilian territory or crashed, the military needed a cover story. The cover story that worked best? Aliens. No spy agency in the world would believe the United States was monitoring them with alien spacecraft. In 2024, the US Congress's own Pentagon report officially confirmed in the 1950s and 60s, many of the UFOs that people reported were in fact classified American spy planes and experimental aerospace technology being tested in secret, including the Roswell crash. Official confirmation, decades late. And this pattern continues today. The US still tests aircraft technology it doesn't want the world to see, under the shelter of UFO mythology. Let the story circulate. Let people argue about aliens. No one will guess the truth. Here is explanation number 2. Some of those UFOs are enemy surveillance assets. We are no longer in the Cold War, but geopolitical competition is fiercer than ever. China, Russia, Iran, all developing sophisticated aerial technology designed to probe US military capabilities. The football-shaped object over the Indo-Pacific in 2024? Defense analysts suggest it could be a Chinese high-altitude.
In 2022, the United States Department of Defense established an entirely new office dedicated to this question, the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, the AARO. Their mandate: investigate every single UFO claim and sighting record from 1945 to the present day, classified and unclassified, military and civilian. In February 2024, they published their first comprehensive report. The conclusion was unambiguous. There is no evidence that the US government has ever possessed, recovered, or is reverse engineering extraterrestrial technology. There is no evidence that any unidentified aerial phenomenon observed to date represents technology from another world. Most documented UFOs, according to AARO, are drones, weather balloons, spy aircraft, satellites, commercial planes, or rockets. And some are planets. Venus, in particular, has been mistaken for a UFO more times than any official would care to admit. NASA echoes this position. No confirmed extraterrestrial origin, no verified contact, no smoking gun. The former director of the AARO went further and offered a pointed warning about the 2026 document dump. Releasing 162 classified files without context, without analysis, without expert guidance, he said, would fuel conspiracy theories, misinformation, and pseudoscience. It would create more heat than light. He's probably right. The decision to release these files to the public without the scientific infrastructure to interpret them looks less like transparency and more like misdirection, a way to keep public attention on orbs and saucers while more pressing questions go unasked. But here's the uncomfortable truth. I believe in aliens. Not in the government is hiding crashed saucers in Area 51 sense, but in the statistical, mathematical, cosmological sense. The universe contains an estimated 2 trillion galaxies. Our galaxy alone has hundreds of billions of stars. A significant portion of those stars have planets. A significant portion of those planets are inhabitable zones. The idea that in all of that, across 13 billion years, Earth is the only place where life developed feels, to me, almost absurd. Life here started within a few 100 million years of the planet cooling enough to support it. It's not exotic, it's chemistry. And chemistry doesn't only happen here. So yes, I think aliens exist. But do the UFOs we see have anything to do with them? The great scientist Carl Sagan said it best. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. A blurry infrared video of a light source making an unusual turn? That is not extraordinary evidence. A dot on a 54-year-old photograph? That is not extraordinary evidence. A sworn statement from federal agents? Remarkable, but not extraordinary evidence. If an alien civilization had the technology to travel across interstellar distances so vast that even light takes tens of thousands of years to cross them, and arrived at our solar system, would they do so in ways that left only blurry footage from military drones? Would they hover near US military bases? Would they appear for 35 minutes and then vanish politely? It doesn't quite fit. The most likely explanation for the remaining unexplained cases is something mundane we haven't identified yet. A natural phenomenon we haven't cataloged. A classified technology we weren't. What those phenomena are, that is very much in dispute. The US government has now confirmed in its own official reports that many historical UFOs were classified military technology, enemy surveillance, or misidentified ordinary objects. The Roswell crash was a spy balloon. The alleged alien bodies were crash test dummies. The Cold War UFO wave was partly a cover story for America's own secret aerospace programs. For the remaining unexplained cases, the government's own office says there is no evidence of extraterrestrial origin. NASA says the same. But 162 files have now been released, and some of those files raise questions that nobody, not the Pentagon, not NASA, not the scientists, has answered. The orange orbs, the mothership, the 90-degree turns, the moon photographs. Mystery thrives where transparency is absent, and that is exactly what certain political actors want, to keep you looking at the sky, arguing about aliens, while real questions about accountability, governance, and truth go unasked. The healthy response to UFO files is not blind belief, and it's not dismissal. It is the same thing that separates science from mythology: evidence, scrutiny, honesty, and the courage to say, I don't know yet, but I'm still looking. Because somewhere out there, in 2 trillion galaxies, across 13 billion years, in the